It all started as a peaceful day in the snowy wilderness. A seasoned hiker, Alex, had ventured deep into the mountains, seeking solitude and the thrill of untouched trails. The air was crisp, the sky clear, until it wasn't. Out of nowhere, a thunderous rumble shook the ground beneath Alex's boots. Within seconds, an avalanche tore through the serene landscape, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. As the snow settled, Alex heard something unexpected, a faint, desperate howl. Following the sound, Alex discovered a buried den of wolves, their cries muffled by heavy layers of snow and ice. It wasn't just one wolf trapped, it was an entire pack. With adrenaline pumping and time running out, Alex knew there was no choice but to act. Armed with only basic tools and sheer determination, Alex began digging, fighting the bitter cold and the relentless weight of the snow. Each moment was a race against time, a test of courage, and a battle with nature. But just as Alex freed the first wolf, an unsettling realization set in. This wasn't just about rescuing the pack. Something far more dangerous was lurking nearby, and Alex was no longer the one in control of the situation. What started as an act of compassion quickly turned into a life-or-death struggle that would test Alexa's limits and reveal the raw power of the wild. Stay tuned to find out what happens next, but be warned. This story is not for the faint of heart. As Alex freed the first wolf, its amber eyes locked onto his, a mixture of fear and gratitude flickering in its gaze. It limped a few steps away, shaking off the snow, but it didn't run. Instead, it turned back toward the buried den, its piercing howl echoing through the frosty air. Alex knew the pack wasn't just stuck. They were depending on him to save them. The bond between them, though unspoken, felt undeniable. The digging continued, each wolf emerging with frost clinging to its fur and desperation in its movements. Alexa's hands were frozen, his muscles screaming with exhaustion, but he couldn't stop. Not now, not with those haunting howls urging him on. Each life pulled from the icy tomb was a small victory, but Alex could feel the pressure mounting. Something wasn't right. The woods were eerily silent, aside from the wind's whisper and the occasional crackle of snow shifting in the distance. The deeper Alex worked, the more he felt an unsettling presence, a sensation that he was being watched. It wasn't just the wolves. There was something else out there, hidden among the dense trees and shadows. The last wolf was almost free when a low, guttural growl rumbled from the edge of the clearing. Alex froze, his heart pounding as the wolves around him stiffened, their ears pricking forward. Whatever was out there wasn't friendly. Suddenly, the wilderness didn't feel so empty. Alex realized he had not only stumbled upon a trapped pack of wolves, he'd entered a territory where he might not be the apex predator anymore. Alex stood frozen, the growl cutting through the icy silence like a warning. Slowly, he turned his head toward the sound, but the dense trees revealed nothing. The wolves, now huddled together, were on edge, their bodies tense, noses twitching as they sniffed the air. It wasn't just fear they radiated, it was instinctual awareness. They knew this forest better than Alex ever could, and their unease told him everything he needed to know. He wasn't alone. The growl came again, this time closer, and Alex's eyes darted to the tree line. His mind raced. Was it a predator drawn by the wolf's distress? Or had the avalanche disturbed something territorial? Either way, he was now in its domain. The last wolf still lay partially trapped, whimpering softly as Alex forced his frozen hands to keep digging. Every second felt like a gamble. Suddenly, a shadow moved between the trees. It was massive, but too quick to identify. Alex's pulse thundered in his ears. He tried to keep his breathing steady, but the cold air seemed to grow heavier. He couldn't leave the wolves, but staying might mean facing whatever was lurking out there. The pack, still trembling, began to form a loose circle, their eyes scanning the darkness. For the first time, Alex realized he wasn't just rescuing them. They were now his unlikely allies in survival. Then came a sound he didn't expect, a sharp snap, like a branch breaking, directly behind him. Spinning around, Alex's flashlight caught the faintest glimpse of glowing eyes, low to the ground, watching him. Whatever was out there, it was close, and it wasn't going to wait much longer. Alex's breath clouded the air as he tried to steady his shaking hands. The glowing eyes didn't move, but they didn't disappear either. Whatever was watching him was patient, calculating. The wolves around him began to growl, low and deep, their hackles rising as they shifted into a defensive stance. For a moment, Alex felt the strange weight of being part of the pack. It was a fragile alliance, but in this moment, they were bound by a shared threat. The final wolf was still trapped, its whines growing louder as the tension in the clearing thickened. Alex worked faster, his fingers numb and clumsy, clawing at the snow as if the earth itself might swallow him if he didn't finish. The growl behind him turned into a snarl, and then came the sound of something heavy moving through the brush. It wasn't alone. Alex could hear more, faint but deliberate, circling just out of sight. A sudden burst of movement made Alex flinch. One of the wolves broke from the pack and charged into the shadows, teeth bared. A fierce yelp followed, and the silence that came after was deafening. Alexa's heart sank. Whatever had been lurking wasn't just watching anymore, it was testing them. The rest of the pack bristled, their growls growing louder, almost drowning out the faint sounds of the trapped wolf's breathing. Alex was running out of time. He grabbed a broken branch, more for comfort than defense, and turned to face the darkness. The flashlight flickered in his hand, casting shaky beams of light across the trees. Then all at once, the forest erupted. A blur of motion broke through the tree line, and Alex barely had time to react as chaos unfolded around him. The clearing exploded into chaos as the blur from the trees revealed itself, a massive predator, fur bristling and teeth gleaming in the dim light. It was a mountain lion, larger than Alex had ever imagined, its eyes burning with hunger and determination. The wolves scattered, barking and snapping, their unity dissolving under the pressure of survival. Alex's heart raced as he gripped the makeshift branch tighter, his mind screaming for him to run, but his body rooted in place. Before Alex could react, the mountain lion lunged at the pack, swiping with claws that tore through the icy air. The wolves fought back, their snarls filling the clearing as they tried to drive it away. But then, amidst the chaos, Alex noticed something else, a second pair of glowing eyes, lower to the ground and further back in the shadows. It wasn't alone. The realization hit him like a punch to the chest. The mountain lion wasn't hunting for itself. It was protecting its cubs. The avalanche hadn't just buried the wolf's den. It had disrupted the mountain lion's territory, forcing it into a desperate and dangerous confrontation. Now, Alex was caught between two forces of nature, both fighting for survival. The trapped wolf let out a final, desperate cry, snapping Alex out of his paralysis. He dropped to his knees and dug with all his strength, ignoring the chaos around him. The wolves held their ground, their movements synchronized as they shielded Alex and their injured packmate. But the mountain lion wasn't backing down, and Alex knew this standoff couldn't last much longer. As the tension reached its peak, Alex heard a distant rumble. At first, he thought it was his pounding heart, but then it grew louder. The earth began to tremble, and a horrifying thought crossed his mind. Another avalanche might be coming. The rumble grew louder, shaking the ground beneath Alex's knees. He froze, glancing toward the distant mountains, where a faint cloud of snow was beginning to rise. The realization hit him hard. another avalanche was barreling down, and this time there would be no outrunning it. The mountain lion snarled, momentarily distracted by the trembling earth. The wolves sensed it too, their howls rising in unison, a haunting sound that echoed through the forest. Alexa's fingers worked furiously, and with one final pull, the trapped wolf broke free, collapsing onto the snow with a weak yelp. Relief flooded through Alex, but there was no time to celebrate. He had to move. The wolves began to retreat, one by one, disappearing into the trees. But Alex hesitated. The mountain lion hadn't moved, its eyes now locked on him. For a brief moment, the predator's aggression seemed to fade, replaced by something almost resigned. Then Alex saw them, two cubs emerging from the shadows, huddling close to their mother. The pieces clicked into place. The avalanche had displaced everyone, wolves, predators, and humans alike. And they were all fighting to survive in a world suddenly turned hostile. Alex slowly backed away, lowering his makeshift weapon. He wasn't the enemy here. As the roaring avalanche drew closer, Alex made a split-second decision. He turned and ran toward the wolves' retreating forms, trusting the pack to lead him to safety. Behind him, the mountain lion gathered its cubs, disappearing into the wilderness just as the avalanche thundered through the clearing. When the snow finally settled, Alex and the wolves stood on a rocky ledge, safe but shaken. As dawn broke, Alex watched the pack fade into the trees, a silent reminder of the fragile balance between survival and trust in the wild. As the first rays of sunlight stretched across the mountains, Alex stood on the rocky ledge, his breath steadying as he watched the wolves vanish into the dense forest below. The events of the past hours felt surreal, like a blur of instinct, fear, and courage woven together by the unpredictable forces of nature. He couldn't help but marvel at how close he had come to the brink, and how unlikely allies, wolves, and even a mountain lion, had shaped his survival. The clearing below was now a blanket of fresh snow, the aftermath of the second avalanche erasing the chaos of the night. It was quiet again, but not the peaceful silence Alex had first encountered on his hike. This quiet was different. It felt earned, like the forest itself was catching its breath. As Alex began his descent back to the trailhead, he reflected on the delicate balance of life in the wild. Every creature out here, from the wolves to the mountain lion, was simply trying to survive in an unforgiving environment. The lines between predator and prey, ally and threat, blurred in moments of desperation. He couldn't shake the image of the wolves, standing guard over him, or the mountain lion's fierce protection of its cubs. By the time Alex reached the safety of his car, his hands were trembling again. But this time, it wasn't from the cold. He had come to the mountains seeking solitude, but he was leaving with a story of survival, connection, and the raw power of nature. As he drove away, Alex glanced back at the towering peaks and whispered a quiet thank you, grateful to have been part of something much bigger than himself.